Yeah.
Those who finish Sunnah, inshallah, Allah will come closer. Not for me, but for Allah Azza wa Jalla. And please be mindful of those that may be still praying Sunnah. بسم الله الحمد لله الحمد لله على إحسانه وأشكره على فضله وامتنانه ولا إله إلا الله تعالى لسانه وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله الداعي إلى رضوانه صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وإخوانه أما بعد. So, very briefly, tonight is not going to be long. Many of us, I'm sure, are hungry and excited to taste the barbecue. So, the components of the verse tonight is just two different readings. And I tried to pick something that was relevant, remind you.
So it has to come down. It's gonna fall. No, unscrew. And then this comes back.
So anyway, the readings have to do with something relevant. One is we came to the Masjid. How can we make the most of the Masjid is by Niyāt. So there's a famous book, Al-Madkhal ibn Hajj al-Maliki, rahimahullah. And his brother said he was the only scholar in the history to have comprised a book that specifically deals with the niyat, the multiple intentions you can have when you do an action so you can make the most of it. As we have ikhlas to Allah, but when you do an action for Allah, you can intend so many different rewards. So that is one. Number two is, what is the virtues and the rewards of feeding food? That's the composition. The second reading is from رسالة الإمام ابن رجب الحنبلي رحمه الله where he explained the hadith of Mu'adh ibn Jabal فيما يختصم المرء بعده. So anyhow, inshallah, once we get through with that, inshallah, the food will be ready. So Ibn Hajj rahimahullah mentions that what is the intention of one when he goes to the masjid. So he says he should intend when he goes into the masjid to fulfill the fard of Allah, the obligation a believer has to Allah. And he should not have any mixed intention with that from something of this dunya, such as fulfilling his personal need or other than that. So that why لألا يبطل أجر الخطى إلى المسجد بقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يريد إلا الصلاة. He says, because if you have intentions for something of this world, then it doesn't mean the salah or the worship you do in the masjid is not accepted, but the reward of walking to the masjid is lost. Because you had an ulterior motive, you had a different intention. And Allah knows best, this is from His ijtihad, so Allah knows that this is definite. But anyhow, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned the reward of the one when he takes one step to the masjid, his good deed is increased, his sin is forgiven, his rank is elevated. And he mentioned some believers, if they don't have a sin, then every step it's a good deed. But Allah knows those who don't have sins. So anyhow, the Prophet said he only intends leaving his house to salah. So when he has that intention, he gets that. And then he says that he also intends from that a niyyah to fulfill the obligation of the fard of praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Second is the niyyah of visiting the house of Allah and magnifying or showing one of the symbols of Allah. As Allah says in the Quran, وَمَنْ يُعَظِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ فَإِنَّهَا مِنْ تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ. Whoever venerates the symbols of Allah, those things in the religion, such as the masjid or the adhan or the mushaf, these are symbols. So this is something that he can also intend. He says that also you make a niyyah that when I get to the masjid, I will pray tahiyyatul masjid, the 2 rak'ah. Because every time you make a niyyah, as the Prophet mentioned in the hadith, before you do it, كُتِبَتْ لَهُ حَسَنَةٌ كَامِلَةٌ. The full reward is written for you. So some things we take it as a routine, like I've been here every day, walillah alhamd, for so many years. But if that intention is there, you get extra reward. Who knows, maybe you're not able to fulfill that action. And then he says, he makes an intention, if there's something harmful in the path, he's going to clear it out. Because that is a sign of iman. As the Prophet ﷺ says in the hadith, الإيمان بضع وستون أو بضع وسبعون شعبة وأدناها إماطة الأذى عن الطريق. He said Iman is 70 or so odd branches, that the lowest branch of Iman is if you see something harmful in the way, you clear it out the way to keep the people safe. He says after that, he makes an intention to make i'tikaf. It doesn't mean you're going to sleep in the masjid. I'tikaf is just devoting your time and self for Allah. So when you make that niyyah, it's halal to eat in the masjid, it's halal to drink. But if that niyyah is not there, then we're not allowed to be doing that, because this is the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, a person should intend wearing some adornment, his best clothes, to the masjid. Ya bani Adam, khudhu zinatakum 'inda kulli masjid. Allah said in Surah Al-A'raf. And this doesn't mean just a masjid, but when you're going for salah, Allah told us to wear our best and adorned clothing. That's why some of the Sahaba, like Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, some people may think, it's normal to pray tahajjud in pajamas. But Abdullah ibn Mas'ud used to have a special garment that he would wear for tahajjud. It's dark, nobody saw him, but he knew Allah saw him. So that's what they used to do for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He mentions that, and you should make the intention to learn knowledge, or you can teach it to someone who doesn't know, or to research a question. Many of us have a question, and we come to the masjid to ask those people, our brothers our sisters who can answer. And then he says, he makes a niyyah to visit his Muslim brothers in the masjid, and to visit the scholars who may be in that masjid, and the righteous people that may be in the masjid. And he says to take some of the good and the barakah that comes in the gatherings where people worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the masjid. And some of that is taken from salah and congregation. Or if they find news that there's a sick Muslim in the community, they visit him. So these are just examples. The scholars say, An-Niyāt tijaratul ulama. That niyyah is the trade and business of the scholars. Why? Because in one action, let's say many of us have co-workers. We have the same tasks, duties, projects, but one of our co-workers, he made triple, quadruple, quintuple our salary. How would we feel? I did the same work, I did the same hours, but the niyyah, somebody next to us, he could have been there for a shorter time, but he earned so many more rewards. So the next part is some of the virtue of feeding food. So Imam Rajab rahimahullah, he mentions the ayat which will take a lot of time in Surah Al-Insan, Surah Al-Dahr, وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَأَسِيرًا إِنَّمَا نُطْعِمُكُمْ لِوَجْهِ اللَّهِ لَا نُرِيدُ مِنكُمْ جَزَاءً وَلَا شُكُورًا إِنَّا نَخَافُ مِن رَّبِّنَا يَوْمًا عَبُوسًا قَمْطَرِيرًا فَوَقَاهُمُ اللَّهُ شَرَّ ذَلِكَ الْيَوْمِ وَلَقَاهُمْ نَضْرَةً وَسُرُورًا وَجَزَاهُم بِمَا صَبَرُوا جَنَّةٌ حَرِيرًا. Allah mentioned the reward for those who fed out of love for Allah or love of that food. Allah knows if it's authentic, but there's a sabab al-nuzul that said Ali and Fatima, they made another to fast 3 consecutive days of it. It's enough, but they made a vow to fast so that they could get help from Allah. So every day at the time of iftar, one day a person came, a miskin, a beggar, so they gave their iftar to the beggar. And then the second day was the time of iftar, a yatim, an orphan came, they gave their iftar to the yatim. And then the third day, they were about to have iftar, a prisoner came, and they gave it to the prisoner. So Allah, He said, those who feed on love of that food or love of Allah, a beggar or an orphan or a prisoner, and they say, we don't feed you out of wanting anything from you. We only seek the pleasure of Allah. لا نريد منكم جزاء ولا شكورا. We don't want things, nor do we want a recompense for what we give you. Why? The believer's condition, إِنَّا نَخَافُ مِنْ رَبِّنَا يَوْمًا عَبُوسًا قَمْطَرِيرًا. We fear from our Lord the day of judgment, that the person, as in the surah Abasa wa Tawalla, he frowned. The abus is sighatul fi'ul. The person will frown so much on the day of judgment because of stress. And Arus and Qatira, they will be overwhelmed with its calamities. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says that فَجَزَاهُمْ بِمَا صَبَرُوا جَنَّةً وَحَرِيرًا فَوَقَاهُمُ اللَّهُ شَرَّ ذَلِكَ الْيَوْمِ. Allah saved them from the evil, the harm of that day, and وَلَقَّاهُمْ نَضْرَةً وَسُرُورًا. Allah gave them happiness and pleasure because of that act that they did. So this is in the Quran. As for the hadith, there are many, but we're just mentioning a few of them. That in the hadith of Sunnah Tirmidhi, from the companion Abu Sa'id al-Khudri said that any believer who feeds another believer upon their hunger, أَيُّمَا مُؤْمِنٍ أَطْعَمَ مُؤْمِنًا عَلَى جُوعٍ أَطْعَمَهُ اللَّهُ مِنْ ثِمَارِ الْجَنَّةِ. Allah will feed them from the fruits of Jannah. وَمَنْ سَقَى مُؤْمِنًا عَلَى ظَمَنٍ سَقَاهُ اللَّهُ مِنَ الرَّحِيقِ الْمَخْتُومِ. And whoever gives drink to a believer when they are thirsty, Allah will let them drink from Rahiq al-Makhtum. Allah mentioned is one of the rivers of Jannah. وَخِتَامُهُ مِسْكٍ. It will be sealed with musk. The wine of this world, the alcohol of this world, Qatada ibn Du'abat al-Salusi, he said there's 4 harms in it. That 1, it makes you urinate a lot. 2, it makes you throw up. 3, it makes you, it gives you a lot of headaches, and it makes you intoxicated. But in Jannah, لا ينزعون فيها أو لا ينزعون, I forget the ayah, but they will not feel the headache from it. لا يصدعون عنها ولا ينزعون. They will not feel the headache from it, nor will they get drunk from it. So anyhow, another virtue of feeding others is that the Prophet ﷺ, the first khutbah he gave when he came to Medina, and this has a lot of wisdom. You're starting a new community. You have unfamiliar people. You want them all to work towards a goal. He mentioned these 4 things. أَيُّهَا النَّاسُ أَفْشُوا السَّلَامَ. Spread the salam. Salam is not just the people we know or people we like. He's a Muslim. وَإِذَا جَاءَكَ الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِآيَاتِنَا فَقُلْ سَلَامٌ عَلَيْكُمْ كَتَبَ رَبُّكُمْ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ الرَّحْمَةَ. This ayah was revealed in Mecca when the leaders of Quraysh wanted a special gathering. And some of the companions who were, strong in faith, but they didn't have high status in the society, they came to the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet, of course, he loves his Sahaba more than the non-Muslims. They want the non-Muslims to become Muslim. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him, when those who believe in our signs come to you, say Salamun alaykum. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala likes this greeting, and it is the sign of the Day of Judgment that the people make salam only to those whom they know. So he said, Afshu salam wa at'imu ta'am, and feed food, wa silu al-arham, and join the ties of kinship, wa sallu bil-layl wa nasu niyam, tadkhul jannat bis-salam, and pray at night, the tahajjud, when people are asleep, you will enter Jannah with ease. And as mentioned, the virtue of feeding someone, we may think the virtue of feeding people is only if it's elaborate food or very sophisticated cuisine. But as mentioned, that Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, he used to tell his son about the story of the man Sahib al-Raghif, the man who gave a piece of bread. He said he was from Bani Israel and he worshipped Allah for 70 years. And then Shaitan glorified in his eye another woman who was not halal for him until he committed the evil act of zina with her for 7 consecutive nights. So it said in the Akhirah, before this happened, before it was known, that after he did that sin, he found a poor person and he gave him a piece of bread. So he preferred that person over himself, over his own hunger, and then that man of Ben Israel died. So the Prophet ﷺ was given the revelation that those 70 years of ibadah, the 7 nights of zina was heavier. But that one piece of bread he gave, it was more heavier than the 7 nights of zina, and that's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgave him. And that's why the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he also encouraged us to think of our neighbors. I know in this country the culture is not common, or California, other states, it's common your neighbor will give you a plate or a dessert or something. Here people think, what, you think I need your food? Why are you giving me food? It's not common in the culture. But the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned that Abu Dhar, he gave advice to Abu Dhar, إِذَا طَبَخْتَ مَرَقًا وَإِذَا طَبَخْتَ مَرْقَةً فَأَكْثِرْ مَاءَهَا وَتُعَاهِدْ جِيرَانَ. Abu Dhar, when you cook soup, that increase the water in it to give more amount. Maybe your family has sufficient amount, but increase that amount so you can give to your neighbor. And that's why he said the believer is not one who goes to bed full and his neighbor is hungry. The last part is some of the mawaqif of the Salaf, the earlier generations, and then how much they used to love feeding others. So it's mentioned that some of them at the time of iftar, they would not eat their iftar unless they were with not just another person to eat with, but they used to look for the masakeen, which is coming very common now. Some people think in America it's like impossible to be broke or impossible to be poor. That we see is common now. Allah knows the future, but this homelessness crisis, and then people are imprisoning homeless people. Wallahi, this country needs hidayah. These people need to know who is Allah. If you don't teach them who is Allah, they will not enjoy this life and the next either. So anyways, mentioned Abdullah ibn Umar that when he would not break his fast except there was orphans, yatama, or masakeen with him. And he said that وَرُبَّمَا أَعْلَمَ أَنَّ أَهْلَهُ قَدْ رَدُّوهُ عَنْهُ فَلَمْ يُفْطِرْ فِي تِلْكَ اللَّيْلَةِ. If he knew his family turned away the orphan and the beggars, he would not eat that night. He would be so punctual in eating with an orphan or a beggar, he wouldn't eat if his family turned him away. As mentioned that Abu Suwal al-Adawi, he said that the people of Bani Adi, which if I'm not mistaken is the clan of Umar radiallahu anhu, that when they used to pray in their masajid, none of them would break their fast on food by themselves. They would refuse to eat by themselves. And then if he found someone with him, he would eat with him. Or وَإِلَّا أَخْرَجَ طَعَامَهُ إِلَى الْمَسْجِدِ مَعَ النَّاسِ وَأَكَلَ النَّاسُ مَعَهُ. Or he would take his food to the masjid just so those people could eat with him. And he said some of them, they used to feed their brothers while they're fasting. And they would sit and serve them, such as Hassan al-Basri and Abdullah ibn Mubarak. It's mentioned Abdullah ibn Mubarak, one of the great scholars of the Tabi'ut Tabi'een, that he said that whenever he desired the food, this generation, they call them foodies, and they have food cravings, and they just post food. So he was above that. But when he had a strong desire for a food, what he would do, he would not make it unless there was a guest with him, so that guest would be with him. He said many people, they would prefer their brother, many people would prefer of the righteous predecessors to feed a Muslim rather than just giving regular charity to a miskin because of the virtues that are in feeding others. So alhamdulillah, respected brothers, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and sisters to make this a blessed gathering. And we make this niyyah, inshallah, that we don't just come to eat for our physical nourishment. Alhamdulillah, that's good. But what we can think long term, I'll finish with, is that the story of Rabi' al-Quthaym, rahimahullah, one of the great tabi'un, that he said one day he desired halwa, like a dessert. So his family made that dessert for him. فَلَمَّا صَنَعَتْ لَهُ دَعَا بِالْفُقَرَاءِ فَأَكَلُوا. He called poor beggars to eat that dessert that he desired. So his family told him, they said, أَتَعَبْتَنَا وَلَمْ تَأْكُلْ. So you made us do all this work, we made this dessert, and you didn't eat any of it, right? So look at his wisdom. He said that, وَمَنْ أَكَلَهُ غَيْرِي. He said, who else got this food except me? And what he turned them to, he said that, إِذَا أَكَلْتُهُ كَانَ فِي الْحِشْرِ. When I eat food, we know it's going to go in the toilet. It's not going to remain. But he said, وَإِذَا أَطْعَمْتُهُ كَانَ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ مَذْخُورًا. But if I feed others, the reward of that food is stored with Allah. So that's what he meant by I eat the food. So inshallah, we enjoyed. Jazakumullah khair. Subhanallah bihamdik. Inshallah, la ilaha illallah. Make dua in our brother Mustafa al-Hijab just passed away. Many of us know him. Allah, it's very difficult to talk about this topic. Just coming from the funeral and seeing how, subhanAllah, how short this life is. So just make dua for him, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Subhanallah bihamdik. Inshallah, la ilaha illallah.